This episode contains adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised.
We will call the sheriff. He can't watch you forever. I shall keep ringing. Again, this is no joke. Stay away from him at noon and as well as night. If I can't get you together and you make a fool of me such as the school has done, I shall come out there and put a bullet in that little girl's head. Too many think this is a joke. We'll see in time. I know where you live. I've been watching your house.
The story of the Circleville letter writer is not an easy one to tell. Not because it's particularly gory or upsetting like many of the true crime stories I've covered before, but because the story itself is really hard to define. Tangents and conspiracies surround this case, but might not all be connected. According to the letters themselves, there are numerous deaths linked to this story, but established history argues otherwise. Ironically, it is a story that goes in circles, and things that seem unrelated and random at first all connect, maybe decades later. Even something as simple as when the letters started and when they officially ended is disputed. Many of the statements made by the Circleville letter writer were outlandish and have never been proven to be true. Still, other letters exposed scandalous secrets about the town that might have otherwise remained hidden. The town itself, Circleville, is like many small towns in the Midwest. It's best known for its annual pumpkin show that draws in crowds from all over Ohio and even neighboring states. During the rest of the year, visitors who are not there on business or to visit family are likely those passing through to take a quick picture of some of the roadside oddities that the town boasts of. Mainly a pumpkin-shaped water tower and a road that is named Hitler No. 1 Road. There are hundreds of cities like Circleville, but what makes it truly unique? What the town is by far the most well known for is a strange letter writing campaign that spanned 2 decades and may have left at least one person dead. Between the late 1970s and the mid-90s, a mysterious person known only as the Circleville letter writer sent well over 1,000 letters to people all over Circleville and nearby cities. This letter writer set out to expose corruption and moral indecency, using the confusing tactic of threatening to murder, blackmail, or bomb anyone who got in his or her way. This is the story of the Circleville letters. As I mentioned before, this story is one that is difficult to tell linearly. Different people involved all have told different stories about what happened. There are 3 main people involved who have told their stories in detail, and all accounts are unreliable for numerous reasons. The first person involved is Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, the former sheriff of Pickaway County who held the world record for the longest tenure in office of any sheriff in the country. Radcliffe and the Circleville police have their own version of this story, but they practiced some pretty unethical tactics when liaising with the media and worked with a prosecutor who tried to force a false statement from at least one witness. So the rest of their version of events may not be completely accurate, as far as we know. The second person involved is a woman named Mary Gillespie. She would eventually become the main target of the Circleville letter writer, who would send her threats and harass her by putting up lewd signs about her and her family all around town. Mary would eventually come forward to say that she had been untruthful about at least one important aspect of this case, so the rest of her story needs to be looked at carefully. The third person involved who has told his story in perhaps the best detail is a man named Paul Freshour. Paul Freshour was Mary's brother-in-law and her husband Ron's best friend. He is also the man who would eventually be put on trial for being the Circleville letter writer, as well as attempting to murder Mary Gillespie. and perhaps this is the best point to dip into the story when Paul was on trial. It was October of 1983, and at that point, people in Circleville had been receiving strange and threatening letters for over 5 years, since 1977. The letters covered many topics, but centered largely around the accusations that Mary Gillespie, who worked as a school bus driver, had been having an affair with the superintendent of her district, another man that was also married, named Gordon Massie. Just like Mary Gillespie and Sheriff Radcliffe, Paul Freshour's accounts of what happened are not entirely accurate. He has spoken with the media numerous times over the years and provided a great deal of information, but in doing so has occasionally contradicted his own prior statements and made some pretty wild, unsubstantiated accusations. All three voices can help piece together the story of what happened, but all three are unreliable to a degree. Years later, a journalist named Martin Yant would put together the story in a more coherent way, and his account is without a doubt the most accurate retelling of what actually happened. Much of the information available publicly about the Circleville letters is thanks to his work. Now, with this knowledge that Paul Freshour and Mary Gillespie would end up in court pitted against each other and tell drastically different stories about what happened, we can go back and examine their statements as the story was unfolding. The letters began in March of 1977. The first 3 that have been preserved were actually not sent to Mary Gillespie, though she would later become an obsession of the letter writer. Rather, they were sent to Gordon Massie, the superintendent of the local Westfall School District. This district covers an expanse of farmland and forest between Circleville and the nearby town of Mount Sterling. Gordon Massie has been something of an elusive figure in the story of the Circleville letter writer, as he spoke to the media very rarely. We know that he and his wife were having trouble in their marriage about a year or two before 1977, and that his wife, Clara, even filed for divorce. But evidently, the two reconciled, and they stopped the divorce proceedings in late 1976. Paul Freshour would claim in some later writings that Massie had previously worked in another school district, but was asked to leave due to inappropriate behavior with his subordinates and drinking on the job. This is, however, not verified anywhere else. The first letter sent out to Gordon Massie did not have the distinctive block handwriting that the Circleville letter writer would later adopt. Rather, it seemed to alternate between lowercase and capital letters. It was sent to Gordon Massie on March 2nd, 1977. The letter reads as follows.
Dear Sir, according to my girlfriend, you have asked her to go out many times and you asked the other female bus drivers too. Due to your position and their jobs with you, you should not do this. This must stop at once for the good of the school and families. If they are not stopped, I will be forced to write to the school board, and I would hate to do that. To prey on another man's girl is untouchable, especially when they're out trying to make a living. There's also talk of you dating a married woman and taking advantage of them. Do you need time and names again? Please think. I suggest you find yourself a pimple-faced whore and start up with her and leave my girls alone.
Just 2 days later, 2 additional letters were sent out to the Westfall School Board and the superintendent of a neighboring district. The letter to the Westfall School Board read as follows.
Dear School Board, this is to inform you that you have several dissatisfied female drivers due to their working relationship with their boss. He dates a lot of the drivers. One, because she's afraid to because of her job and because of his position. He constantly asks several of them over and over. No one ever stops him. He will not take no for an answer from a couple of them. It even bothers some that he has not been asked. They would like the chance to tell him where to go. Under these circumstances, they cannot be treated equally. He picks on the weaker ones constantly. This is a terrible working condition and must be stopped for the sake of the schools and the families involved. Again, you should investigate. He has dated several of them. Before long, he'll start repeating the rounds all over again, causing some more hardship and others a low morale problem. Some have even considered a bargaining unit for job protection. He's a nice guy on the outside, but please talk to your drivers independently for the full facts of how he is to work for. Please talk to them and treat the problem. Some are nervous and shouldn't be driving under additional pressure as this. After me writing this letter, I sure hope he does not upset my girl for his sake.
The other letter read,
Dear Superintendent, this is to inform you several of your bus drivers are working under pressure due to their boss constantly putting the moves on them. Some like it, the decent ones don't. Is he getting paid to run the women or run the bus lines? Again, some move behind him because they need the attention and are weak. Should this position be filled by someone capable of taking advantage of his job, school, and people that work for him? Is this the type of family man that we need in a position such as this? Capable of using working women because of his advantages. One woman dates him because of her job. This is a terrible working relations, and something must be done about it. Most of the drivers know what is going on constantly. You should talk to them and also him before something drastic happens, for he cares not if they are married or single. Could he be allowed to hound them constantly? I was informed at first by a close friend and refused to believe it, but she proved it through several other friends. I told them to take this matter to someone, but so far they have not. It's only a few, but they still should count too. I can prove this and will if her school insists on it. I feel that at first he should be talked to, and the drivers also. I will find out through the grapevine if he has been put in line. I know of his affairs now and can prove it, and will do so if he continues harassing drivers for dates. Especially when they keep saying no and he constantly hounds them. I have met him and he seems like a sincere man. So I would like to see this matter made right and forgotten. I can't stand the thought of him thinking about this. One of these drivers, or especially my girl, which I am sure makes no difference to him. I am being informed of him daily and can point out the last drivers he has been with. I shall prove it to you. Again, he needs talking to so this matter can be forgiven. Give the drivers a break. Help them. Find out for yourself. Treat all equal. Friends of concerned drivers that are in fear. I have always been against school tax dollars bonuses because of their purpose and won't pay it unless correction and action has been taken.
Gordon Massie's reaction to all of these letters, and whatever his family's reaction may have been, was not documented very well. We know only that he did not face any repercussions career-wise, and the investigation into who was writing the letters was kept quiet. It's quite possible that Massie received more letters sent directly to him and his family, but if he did, those letters have never been made public. It's interesting to see the difference between the first letter, which seemed solely to attack Gordon Massie, and the second two letters which seemed to blame some of the bus drivers for their own harassment. Now, we're going to pause for just a moment to hear a word from today's sponsors. Another letter was sent out on March 18th to the Westfall High School vice principal, and by then the letter writer had adopted their distinctive style of using block capital letters. The letter read as follows.
Dear school, talk to Gordon Massie about his affairs. I shall warn you. I know the truth. I want to protect your school. It has a good reputation. You should keep it like that. I shall send you proof about drive number 62917. She has a child in school there now. I shall prove this shortly. I expect him then to be discharged. You'll see that I am telling the truth.
Later that month, the letters would find their way to Mary Gillespie, who worked as a bus driver and had not one, but two children in school, a teenage boy named Eric and an 8-year-old girl named Tracy. So it's possible this letter was referencing her and her affair with Gordon Massie, and marked the start of the letter writer turning his obsession to her. One of the earliest letters, sent to Mary on March 21st, 1977, said,
Mrs. Gillespie, stay away from Massie. I know where you live. I have been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke.
A week later, just in case she might have thought the letter was a one-off threat that she could ignore. On March 29th, the writer sent a follow-up.
Call the sheriff. He can't watch you forever. I shall keep ringing. Again, this is no joke. Stay away from him at noon and as well as night. If I can't get you together and you make a fool of me such as the school has done, I shall come out there and put a bullet in that little girl's head. Too many think this is a joke. We'll see in time. I know where you live. I've been watching your house.
Things were escalating rather quickly at this point. The writer had gone from vague accusations to murderous threats. Then a week later, on April 6th, they wrote,
This is your last chance to report him. I know you are a pig and will prove it and shame you out of Ohio. How is your little girl? Will she grow up to be like you?
For some reason, Mary decided to keep the letters a secret from her husband, Ron. But soon after this, the letter writer took it upon themselves to write directly to Ron. The first letter to him read as follows.
We must inform you that your wife is having an affair with Mr. Massie. She has chased him until he caught her. Eliminate them both before they eliminate you. Remember, we know where you work and know your red and white truck. No one can help you. Think of your children and their future. Call the school board and report the truth after you finish your investigation. Notify the school board immediately. Again, your life is in danger.
Ron did indeed drive a red and white truck, so this was not a prank. Whoever this was, they were watching him. Ron confronted Mary and she told him about the other letters. She said she hadn't told him about them before because there was nothing going on between her and Gordon Massie, and she didn't want to worry him. Things then escalated again in mid-April on the 14th, when Ron received a second letter.
Attention, Ron. Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. You are a pig defender. You are also a pig. Make her admit the tryst and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out. Only pigs ride motorcycles. Good hunting in your red and white truck on your way to work. Remember, she hung in his office constantly until she'd broken up his marriage and him. Contact people at school. They're aware. They are starting to laugh, and not only at her. Let her read this. It is no lie. She knows I'm telling no lie. I followed him for weeks, since last summer, and I've seen her meet him several times. He knew if caught, there would be trouble. He is not as serious as people think. He isn't concerned about your family, only himself. He can't have affairs with school employees and keep his job. He knows what I want. When he quits, I'll go away. All you have to do is talk and ask questions from the people that work there. You will see this is no joke.
With the threats escalating, Mary and Ron decided to turn to Mary's sister, Karen Sue Freshour, for help. This formally brought Paul Freshour into the mystery, as he was Karen's husband. The four were all very close friends. If Paul was in fact innocent of the crimes he would later be accused of, then that was the first time he learned about the letters. If he was guilty, then he got to see firsthand how his letters were scaring his in-laws. To give a bit more background on Paul Freshour, he was a man who has been described by all friends and acquaintances as being very smart. Some say he takes this too far and he would be stubborn and argumentative with anyone who disagreed with him, thinking he was always right. Others alleged that he used his brains to mastermind the Circleville letters. As for his other qualities, people also all generally agree that he was a good father to his 3 children, Mark, Helen, and Dawn, and generally a responsible person. As far as whether or not he was a good husband, that is more complicated, but we'll get to that later. Paul had a bit of experience tangential to law enforcement. He'd worked as a prison guard for a time in the 1960s. But by the late 70s, he was a quality control supervisor at the Anheuser-Busch plant. He and Karen lived comfortably about 20 to 30 minutes away from Circleville in Grove City, a suburb of Columbus near where the Westfall School District ended. When Ron and Mary turned to Paul and Karen for help, the four hatched a plan together. Mary said that she suspected she knew who was behind the letters. There was another bus driver named David Longberry who had tried to flirt with Mary, but she'd rejected him. Together, the four of them had the idea to write letters back to Longberry to say they knew who he was and that he needed to stop. They sent half a dozen letters, and they had Paul print them as he had good handwriting. The letters stopped for a time, but started back up in August. Apparently, according to multiple sources, Mary's husband, Ron, had his own theory about who was harassing them. He told Mary that he knew who the letter writer was, but for some reason he did not share with her the identity of this person. Mary had plans to go on a trip to Florida with Karen, so Ron said that he was going to deal with the letter writer while the women were out of town. They were driving down to stay with Paul's relatives. Paul Freshour would later claim that he knew that Mary Gillespie and Gordon Massie were in fact having an affair, and that some of the letter writer's claims were true in that regard. When exactly he arrived at this conclusion is unclear, but he would later claim that Gordon Massie was going to join Karen and Mary on their Florida trip. Why he would agree to let them stay with his parents if he knew about the affair then is unclear, so perhaps he did not know yet. Or perhaps if he was in fact the letter writer and he wanted to get them out of town so he could deal with Ron alone, as he'd found out who he was. But this is all conjecture on conflicting statements. Anyway, according to Paul Freshour, Ron Gillespie was spending his mornings driving around town and taking down signs that accused both Mary and their 8-year-old daughter Tracy of being sluts. Other sources claim the letter writer was not yet taunting the family with signs at this point. Martin Yant, the reporter who would later do a deep dive into the case for both the newspaper Columbus Alive and the show Unsolved Mysteries, claims the signs would not start until about 6 years later. This discrepancy in Paul's account is just one of many. Whatever the case may be, things escalated on the evening of August 19th. Ron Gillespie received a strange phone call at around 11:30 p.m. The phone call was brief, and the contents of that call remain a mystery. After he hung up, Ron told his daughter Tracy that he was going out to catch the man who had been harassing them and kissed her goodbye. He brought his shotgun, climbed into his truck, and drove off. Shortly after this, police found his pickup crashed into a tree. He was dead. He'd fired his gun once, shortly before he died, but left no other clues as to what had happened to him. Sheriff Radcliffe would later tell the media that when Ron died, he'd been following the car of the Circleville letter writer. Mary Gillespie got the call that her husband was dead while she and Karen were still on the road. That night, Sheriff Radcliffe identified his body, then went to tell Ron's parents that he had passed. Paul Freshour met with the sheriff there, wanting to be updated about anything that was found in the investigation into the death of his best friend. Paul also accused Sheriff Radcliffe of being partially responsible because he had not solved the letter writer case as of this point. An autopsy of Ron's body revealed a blood alcohol level of 0.16, twice the legal limit. Ron's friends and family were shocked by this, as Ron was not really a drinker. Tracy would even later say that he did not seem at all drunk that night when they said their goodbyes. It's at this point that someone who would not become significant until much later on entered the story. That is, the Pickaway County coroner, Ray Carroll. Carroll conducted the autopsy on Ron Gillespie and was the one to conclude that he had been drunk driving. He served as both the county coroner as well as a local Circleville pediatrician. Although it would not come to light until 2 decades later, Ray Carroll was a serial child molester. He was under investigation sometime in the 1970s, and complaints had been filed, but nothing was being done. It's currently estimated that Ray Carroll had possibly over 100 victims. Dr. Carroll would apparently ask his young female patients if they wanted to be sexually active later in life. If they said yes, he would use speculums, or sometimes just his fingers, to molest the girls, claiming he needed to widen their vaginas so they could be able to have sex one day. He would have his patients stripped naked for simple physical exams, and would often ask to see them without their parents present, claiming it was for their privacy. One girl had read in a magazine that pelvic exams weren't supposed to start until age 18, so she stopped letting Carol examine her, to which he responded, "Who do you think you are?" Apparently, people in Circleville knew about Carol, and it was something of an open secret. They would even joke about it, calling him the finger doctor. Given the fact that some kind of investigation happened, it's tough to believe authorities had no idea what was going on, especially since there were potentially over 100 victims in such a small town. Whether or not Ray Carroll's crimes would have given him some kind of motivation to help in a cover-up is completely unknown, but it has certainly fueled theories and conspiracies that the official story about Ron drunk driving may not be what actually happened. The Circleville letter writer would eventually take an interest in Ray Carroll himself, but that would not happen until much later. But to get back to the story at hand, Ron Gillespie's death was ruled an accident, but Paul Freshour, his best friend, did not believe it. He confronted Sheriff Radcliffe numerous times about Ron's death. He even also said to his face that the official story seemed like a cover-up. After Ron died, Paul began to distance himself from his sister-in-law, Mary Gillespie. He would rant to his wife, Karen, about how Mary was a slut, and he spoke to her as little as possible. It was also around this time that the letter writer decided there was something off about Ron's death. He started sending letters all around town claiming that Gordon Massie and Mary Gillespie had been the ones to kill Ron. Local grocery store owner Minnie Sharon said she'd received over 50 letters claiming that Gordon Massie and Mary Gillespie had killed Ron. The letters also began targeting Sheriff Radcliffe, saying he was covering up for numerous crimes around town. For a time, this was what the letter writer focused on, with lulls between their campaigns, until 1980, when a strange disappearance of a local school teacher stole the spotlight. Vicky Koch was an elementary teacher in the Westfall School District, and on August 10, 1980, she went to Chillicothe with a friend, Phyllis Young, to see a performance of the play Shenandoah. Apparently, Vicky was supposed to meet up with family in Sandusky a few days later, but she never showed up and wasn't answering her phone. Her family drove down to her Circleville apartment to check on her on August 14th, when they were unable to get a hold of her. When they entered her apartment, her radio was still on, and her purse, car keys, and contacts were still inside. Her bed was in disarray, and she was nowhere to be seen. She'd made it home after the performance because she'd made one last note in her diary about how much fun she had had. Her car was parked on Main Street, half a mile from where she lived, and it was unlocked. Apparently, during the time Vicky was missing, the letter writer took an interest in her case. Reports of what exactly this entailed are rather sparse, with one paper mentioning that they were vaguely threatening letters sent out regarding her disappearance while she was still missing. The content of these letters is unclear. Vicky's skeletal remains were discovered the next month on September 16th in a cornfield, about 30 minutes from Circleville. Her body had decayed enough that they had to use dental records to identify her. Only her genes were found. Her body had been decomposing for 3 to 5 weeks, so the autopsy was inconclusive, as there were no signs of violence on Vicky's skeleton, and any soft tissue damage had been lost in the decomposition. Though her death was ruled a homicide, they could not determine how exactly she had been killed. Vicky Koch's murder has never been solved, but Deputy Chief Bob Chapman in Circleville still keeps a picture of Vicky Koch on his wall to remind him not to give up on the case. He hopes to one day have answers. Years later, the Circleville writer would take an interest in Vicky's case once again, with claims that they had solved her murder. But back in 1980, the case was left in limbo. More after a short break. "1981 brought the next major development when the letter writer sent out 3 letters laced with arsenic to Sheriff Radcliffe, the Pickaway County Children's Services Board, and the Williamsport Village Council. News of this is also very sparse, even in local papers, and police did not publicize the events despite the fact that people all over the county had been getting letters from the same writer, who was now sending out poison. The next year, Paul and Karen Freshour separated. Paul filed for divorce in October, and Karen filed complaints about Paul's behavior in turn. Karen claimed that Paul was a violent man with a temper, and he'd beaten her on numerous occasions. She provided evidence of one beating that left her with a black eye and needing numerous stitches. Paul admitted to at least one beating and went to counseling, saying he regretted his actions. After the divorce proceedings began, Karen moved in with Mary Gillespie. Paul got custody of the children during the proceedings and seemed on track to get permanent custody of Dawn and Helen. Mark was an adult by then and free to live with whoever he wished, and he moved in with Karen. After Karen moved out, she suddenly began to be targeted by the letter writer. Raymond Traynor, the security officer at Karen's job, found numerous signs near her workplace that alleged she was in a lesbian relationship with a coworker. Karen confided in Traynor that someone shot her car and he went to go check it out for himself. He later said that he did see a dent, but not a bullet hole. This harassment continued as Karen and Paul's divorce dragged on. As the holidays approached, things were heating up once again in the letters being sent to Mary Gillespie. She got a Christmas card on December 17, 1982, that said the writer was going to start putting up signs about her daughter all around town. A follow-up card was sent on December 23rd. This card told her that she needed to marry Gordon Massie, and if she refused, by March 1st, there would be lewd signs about her daughter posted around town. The exact working of these cards and signs has not been publicized, likely because they dealt with a minor, and news reports did not want to print something involving vulgar and sexual language about an underage girl. Despite the fact that police had instructed Mary to turn in new letters and avoid getting fingerprints on them, Mary largely disregarded their advice about evidence handling. She got fingerprints on the letters and elected not to turn in the threatening Christmas cards or even mention the cards to police. Things continued to escalate after this. Signs began popping up all over town, but especially along the bus routes that Mary would drive and Tracy would take to school. A few weeks into this, on February 7th, things took a dark turn. That's on the next episode of Unresolved.